Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another IT Wire and Alex on Tech video. Today, I have with me Dr. Rob Walker. He is an AI expert and the Vice President of Decision Management and Analytics for Pegasystems. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I thought we'd start off just by asking, before asking a little bit about your role and your job, but if you can tell us, how did you get into the world of AI and whether you read a lot of robot sci-fi stories like I did growing up?
Yeah, no, I totally did. I was a complete science fiction addict,
Yeah.
when I was a kid. In fact, that's how I started to, I'm native Dutch. And one of the prime reasons for me to even, start reading in English was science fiction. And I'm sure that sort of disposed me to, taking when I was studying computer science, to take AI as a major, and then later I did my PhD in that as well, way before it became so fashionable. But definitely spurred by a lot of science fiction reading. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the science fiction, we've seen that turning into science fact day by day. But I always like to note how, despite all our advances, we're still very much in the black and white era of technology. We still have so far to go. But look, tell us a little bit about your role at Pegasystems.
Yes. So what happened? So I did a PhD in AI. Thought that was very, very interesting, but a little academic.
Sure.
So
And how
at
many
some
years ago
point,
was
I
that?
want. Sorry.
How many years ago was that?
Oh, that was in. I don't want to actually say that. No, I'm kidding. That was like in the 90s. So
And
that was in the 90s. I did a PhD. Then I did a consultancy gig
yeah,
around AI. But AI then was really because we didn't have the data that we now have.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
was all about expert systems and rules, and all the neural networks and deep learning stuff were very, academic disciplines. They
yeah,
had
yeah.
no real business value at the time.
Sure, but I mean, now you're putting your thesis into practice with tools that would have been unimaginable back then.
Unimaginable, yes.
Yeah,
And because we were using all sorts of fake data sets to try out all of these things. We had all the ideas,
yeah,
we didn't have the data, and now the data comes from all directions, right? From cameras in cars to people asking questions to Siri or Google, and anyway, everybody's dropping data points like flies.
yeah.
So now there is a lot of data, and I think AI is growing up. But what I did after that consultancy thing, I set up my own company around AI. We call it decisioning because AI, was not necessarily a good brand. And jury is out, right? Whether it is or not. I think it is.
Yeah.
But that was really in decisioning, predictive analytics, machine learning, all of these kind of things. And then that company was acquired via another company by Pegasystems. Within Pegasystems, I'm globally responsible for this space, AI, decisioning, but not just as an academic discipline, although there's a lot of scientists and data scientists working in my team, of course. It's really around, business benefits using AI and other technologies.
So, Rob, when did Pegasystems start working on AI, and what did they call it before it was renamed AI? Because as you've noticed yourself with your doctorate in AI, I mean, the concept of AI has been around with us for a long time. But what's the latest with AI in Pegasystems in 2018?
Yes, so we've been actually internally calling it AI for quite a bit, right? Because I have a lot of AI PhDs in the team, and they like to call it AI. But in terms of our own solution, we call it decisioning. I don't even think that's a word, but that's what a lot of people call it. So decision management, it's automated decisions that you would normally expect a human to make, but then very, very accurately and very, very fast, right? So
Yeah.
we've really tried to focus that AI or decisioning in customer engagement, right? It's one of the areas where I think AI really has already shown a lot of benefits. So we keep focusing on that, and we try not to get distracted with all the wild use cases, that you have, because there's just a lot of benefits to be had, both for consumers and for the companies, if you can make better decisions around customers, right, and be more relevant and more proactive and those kind of things. So that's what we're focusing on. But we're also focusing on a lot of the control of that AI, right? And I'm not one of the of the doomsayers of like, oh my God, AI is going to be our overlords in a few years, although I don't rule it out. But we really take the control very seriously, right? Pega really focuses on the Fortune 650 companies in the world, very large companies. They have a lot of data, there's a lot of regulations, and they cannot afford having AI go rogue on them, right? And make decisions, have sort of weird algorithms doing things that they don't intend them to make. So we put a lot of focus on AI control in addition to just, using it at scale.
Sure. And look, I was at a Thales conference. That's a big global logistics, defense, aerospace, company that's huge, and they're in Australia as well. And they were talking about this concept of explainable AI, as opposed to this black box where, as you were saying before, algorithms make weird decisions. So, how are you ensuring? I mean, decision management sounds like that very sort of thing, where you're making sure that the decisions that are being made are something that you can manage and that are able to be explained, whether it's in a court of law or to a customer or to a CEO or to a board. So what are you doing in that regard? And is this something that all AI providers now have to do by necessity so humans can trust its decisions?
I think all AI providers have to do that, and in Europe, where we have GDPR, it's actually a legal requirement. I'm not sure all the companies yet realize that, because everybody with GDPR thinks it's like, it's an opt-in privacy thing. But it's also about explaining any decision that carries legal significance, like, accepting someone or declining someone for a mortgage or a loan, whatever it is. You need to be able to explain it. But explainable AI, I think it's an interesting topic, because that's really a two-edged sword. So first of all, there's a big penalty that you pay for making AI explainable, because some of the fancy algorithms are very hard to explain. They're very complex, and that's why they're so powerful. You can prove they're powerful, right? You can prove their accuracy. It's very high. It's in many cases much higher than human judgment, right? In many, many areas. And given that, the transparency to that, the straitjacket of explanation makes them more effective, because it has to basically dumb itself down. Right. So what we do is we try to explain AI whenever it actually can be explained, and that depends on the algorithm, and then put in controls in what we call this customer decision hub. It's like a single choke point for AI, right? We want to make sure that all the AI is connected through single decision engine, so we can turn it off, but we can also control where you would allow less transparent AI, right? Because in some areas, like, video, images, or recognitions, voice recognition, maybe in some areas of marketing, maybe you want to go all out, right? You will test the algorithms on effectiveness, but if they can't completely explain themselves, maybe that's okay. But in other areas, like, credit risk or collections or, significant decisions around consumers, you really, as you say, you may have to explain that decision to the consumer or to the board or to the regulator. And therefore, the algorithms cannot be as, opaque as others.
But I mean, also, it's not about you explaining the AI as such. It's about the AI explaining the AI. It's got to spit out a report, which hopefully doesn't need any passing by humans to be able to understand. And it's like security. It needs to be programmed in from the ground up so that can happen. And you hit a button and bang, there's your report.
Yeah, but it's not even that's more challenging. You have now AI trying to explain AI.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, the way we do this is like we have sort of, let's put it, a simpler AI trying to explain AI. And if it cannot, if the explanation is so huge, right, it's like a whole encyclopedia of rules trying to explain what the other algorithm is doing, then we call that algorithm opaque, right? So that is sort of our match. But you do need to design that, as you say, from the ground up, right? So we have a whole AI studio, if you want to call it that, with all of the different algorithms. All the algorithms, all the AI methods will get transparency scores, and you have control over what transparency or not you allow for certain business functions.
It just sort of makes me think that, simple things can be very complicated, and it's complicated to make things very simple.
It is complicated, yes. But some things with Einstein, right? I mean, you want to make things as simple as possible, but not simpler than that.
Yeah, that's right.
And some of these things, and I think people underestimate maybe that a little bit, is how incredibly sophisticated some of these algorithms are, right? I mean, we all heard the story about, AlphaGo or now AlphaZero playing Go, and the creators of the initial parameters of that AI program have no idea how that system plays Go, or they would be the world champion in Go, right?
Yeah.
So it gets to a lot of complexity and sophistication in these algorithms, especially because there is so much data. I mean, as a human, we can maybe juggle around 5, 7, if you're very, very smart, maybe 10 different factors in your mind. And I don't know anyone who does that. And these AIs are looking at thousands of things. And very non-linear combinations of things, and that's very non-human.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have insights that you can prove are right. I mean, they work, but it's really almost alien in how they get to that conclusion.
Well, I was just going to bring that very thing up. I remember reading whether it was about Go or chess. I think it was about Go, but the people behind it, or some grandmasters, I mean, I'm sure people can find this story online to get the true story, but they were saying that they always wondered how an alien species might play the game, whether it was Go or chess, and seeing this AI at work doing things that no human could do, they were like, wow, this is how an alien species would be tackling this problem if they were completely different to humanity. Looks like we're the ones who've created aliens in our own midst, as opposed to them. They're out there, but we created them.
That is true. Yes. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. Yeah. Although what I will say, though, is that also some of these algorithms, with all their sophistication, doesn't necessarily mean it's dehumanizing, right? Sure. Because in some areas, yes, the logic is so sophisticated that it may be a little scary. But on the other hand, these same algorithms will be able to read emotions and detect those kind of little tells and look at a lot more data. So in fact, empathy could actually be bigger at some point.
Sure. I mean, what it's doing is it's augmenting humanity. We created it. So, I mean, it's not alien as such. I mean, we just say that because it's different.
Yes.
It's really augmenting humanity. And look, I mean, I've read science fiction stories. There was a famous sequel called, I think, The Psychohistorians by a guy called Donald Kingsbury. If you've ever read the original Foundation trilogy and then Asimov's several other books afterwards, and then there's been half a dozen or more other books written by other authors to try and flesh out that original trilogy into 15 or something books. And of course, the entire Foundation timeline of 20,000 years encompasses just about every book Asimov wrote when you finally read them all, most of which I have. But this Psychohistorians by Donald Kingsbury from 1999 or 2000, he did what Asimov couldn't, and that was to write a sequel. And in this sequel, all of these people have these computers that are sort of stuck behind the back of their heads, a bit like there's a guy called what's his name, Logan, or I forget. There's a guy that's in Empire Strikes Back, and he's with Lando Calrissian, and he's got a thing on the back of his head, and it's sort of a computer. And in this particular story, the computer of this guy is destroyed, and this damages the guy because it's his entire life. The computer can read books in the blink of an eye. I mean, it's half of his personality's in there.
Yes, it's like being blind all of a sudden.
And it's like being blind. It's a fascinating story and fascinating alternate history to the Asimov thing. And look, if you haven't read it, I really strongly recommend it.
Oh no, I already made a note.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Asimov himself said he couldn't think about how to write a sequel, and someone went out there and wrote a sequel, and because it was not authorized, some of the names have been switched around, back to front, but you can tell what what they're talking about. It's very clever, and they make references to the robots and other things. But look, let's get back to Pegasystems and AI and what you're doing, with your customers. And I'm not sure how much you know about Australia, but I mean, I'll just ask the question: how are Australian businesses using AI, and how do we compare with the US, Europe, and Asia? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And what should we be doing better? And I guess those same questions apply to everyone on the planet. What are we all doing right, wrong? And what should we be doing better in 2018 and beyond?
Yeah, well, I think in Australia, so we have some pretty large customers in Australia, and therefore they're using this kind of AI. And and some of them are really totally best practice. So in that sense, I think Australia is doing fine, probably better than average on doing these kind of things. What I've also noted, and this is not just specific to Australia, I've actually been positively surprised when I talk to, because I talk to a lot of executive in these very large companies about their sense of responsibility in this. Because honestly, I would have thought that with AI being as powerful as it is, and what we're doing is allowing companies, to make a lot of money with better decisions, that they might go all out, right? And they would say, okay, well, I'm going opaque because, I'm adding, 100 million or more to the top line. But there seems, especially the bigger brands, all seem to have what I call, and sometimes they call it as well, an AI office, right? That is sort of responsible for these kind of things. I think a lot of companies do have experience with like predictive analytics. That is, well, it's not the same thing exactly, because in AI, the way I define it, at least there needs to be a learning component to it. But it certainly makes them familiar with algorithms that may actually not be doing what you think they're doing. So they go through a sort of a compliance office, right? And I think that's very good. And what we offer those companies is this AI control, right? So you can really, as I said, you can sort of say what algorithms are allowed under what circumstances. And there is this single choke point that would basically say, okay, this algorithm, if it's not allowed, it's not going to be in production. So you can play with it in the sandpit or in the lab, right? But it will actually not be allowed to get into production and touch actual customers. So I think a lot of companies do that. I think what people are thinking about but are not yet really implementing is like ethical testing and bias testing, right? And actually they shouldn't do that with AI only. They should do that with their human operators as well. But really automate ethical testing and make sure that your algorithm don't have sort of an unintended bias for all sorts of politically incorrect attributes.
Are companies using APIs so that their AI can talk to another company's AI, or is that a little bit too high level at the moment?
No, I think that is obviously where this is going really quickly, right? I mean, you can see that even with simple things. I mean, just on the AI play where you use reservation system and it talks to another system, and clearly where this is going. And this reminds me of that story that you just said with the the guy with the computer. That obviously you will have your avatar talk to your bank instead of you spending your own precious cycles to do that, right? And only when there is an escalation, the two AIs are going to say, "Oh, listen, you have to make a decision here." But I think that will be on us pretty quickly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have business people saying we'll have your people talk to my people, but we'll have AI saying I'll have my person talk to your person.
Yes, no, exactly. It's like pick the dress, right? But your avatar will do it, and then when it's maybe two choices, it says, "Oh, maybe you should want to, see if you like this one better than the other one."
And we saw Google with its demonstration of, its AI making reservations for hairdressers. I mean, there's still contention as to whether that was just one of those fake demos or whether it was really real or not. You never can tell sometimes with this.
Well, it may have been real, but it may be, the 1 in a million kind of recording that really worked like that. But regardless, it's clearly that technology, if not today, then tomorrow,
it's coming. Yeah, absolutely.
will be there. And I think that's also an interesting point around if AI is becoming that ubiquitous and also that natural. How will that affect people? So we did a survey, I think, on, I believe, 5,000 individuals. And there is still a lot of people that are, a little scared of AI, but also they don't realize how much they're already exposed to it, right?
Yeah.
And not just talking to Siri or all sorts of other things. There are so many decisions already made by AI, and I think these kind of things like the Google demonstration are going to make people more comfortable with it.
Sure. Now, as we mentioned, Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa, people are used to this sort of voice interface, and you've got your AI tools, but how are the executives interfacing with the AI? Are they able to talk to it in natural language? And the reason why I asked that question is because I remember doing an interview with the CEO and founder of a company called Aera, AERA, and they showed a system where they sucked in all of this data from across a company's systems, and then you could query the AI just with your voice through your phone. You're connecting back to
Yeah.
the systems back in wherever your headquarters are, and you can say, well, how can we save some money this month? And the system would speak back to you. Well, you've got
Yeah.
all this stock sitting in your Brazil warehouses. If you shipped it off to London and sold it at a 20% discount, you'd make $100 million. And
Yes.
I mean, it looked very impressive. Is that something
Yes.
that your systems can do or will do, or is your AI just interfacing with the software and giving its results through dashboards or different
Yeah,
ways?
we're not, because I mean that's a cool interface, but essentially, so it's definitely it's a combination of that Google interface, right? Sort of trying to make people communicate naturally, although I think it's actually pretty constrained. But and then translate that into queries. I think we worry a lot more about those interfaces will come, but I think they are standard, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, we have them on our
me
phones.
personally, I'm not even investing in it. I'll just get it from any cloud vendor or whatever. So we are worrying much more about the infrastructure that actually allows that kind of thing, right? So that works really nice as a demo, but how do you know? You need to know the inventory levels. You need to have all of the rules in a centralized decision engine. And that's the kind of stuff that we do for companies, right? So we say, listen, you have all these little brains in different channels, in different pieces of the business. They're all competing with each other for, attention. Instead of trying to work on your own top line or your own bottom line. And you need a centralized brain to at least talk to your customers consistently and learn from every interaction. So make sure that if people interact with you through the web or through an app, that you can then use that when they're in front of an ATM or they're visiting in the flash in your branch, that all of that is connected. So that's what we're focusing on. And then the interface, sort of the query interface on top of that, I think that's cool, but that will be a commodity, and I don't personally want to invest in that part.
So look, now I want to ask you about the future, and I've just got a bunch of rapid fire questions, which are sort of half, more comedic than real, but I mean, answer whichever way you like. But I always like to end the interview with sort of 3 standard questions, which always has different answers. But one is, where do you see AI evolving over the next decade? So, I say, will Google's Ray Kurzweil give technological birth to his long-desired singularity in that time, or is it still decades away? Will AI remove the need for multiple layers of management, even CEOs or AI experts, board members and chairmen? Have you ever seen the travelers... Oh, sorry, I've got Siri listening to me answering in the background. She said, I don't know how to help with that yet. I mean, it's funny how your intelligent assistants can and even whether it's on your phone or on your kitchen bench, can make funny responses. Anyway, but then have you ever seen the Travelers TV show, which is a great sci-fi show, and it's AI-based director calling the shots from the future? Will Skynet emerge, or will humans always remember that sci-fi movies are a warning and that we should always have a kill switch? And also, will we ever have Asimov's laws of robotics, which really were laws for AI?
Yes. Well, lots of different questions. So I think a few things just on this, right? So first of all, I think the kill switch, I think, is a very naive idea. If we really get to strong AI, truly general purpose, because currently the reason I'm not worried, no matter how sophisticated all of these AI things are, it's still an army of specialists, right? I mean, it's great that AI can, book me a reservation at a restaurant, but that same AI cannot drive my car or iron my shirt, right? So when that happens, I start to worry a little bit more, although I already also be excited you, right? This is what we're reading about, but then it becomes a little bit more risky. But I think, honestly, by that time, a kill switch will be very, very hard.
It'd be too late because we'd be cutting off our own legs. We'd be so reliant upon it.
That would be yes. We'd put ourselves in a nuclear winter.
That's it.
But just by anyway. So that will be, I think, a hard thing to do. But also, honestly, as you know, this is all exponential, right? The moment it is as intelligent as we are, the next second it will be 1,000 times more intelligent, and it will probably outwit any of the kill switches we can design.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so that's all quite into the future. I think the singularity, with Kurzweil, obviously we're all hoping for that. Well, maybe not everyone,
sure,
but some people are, it's at least rooting for that effort. But that will be I think the planning is 30 years from now. So we'll see about that, and honestly, I try really hard, especially around AI, to not extrapolate beyond 5 years. Because it goes very. I was completely surprised, honestly, by even AlphaGo beating the Go champion. I did not think that would happen already. And now with AI designing AI, we're on that sort of exponential curve, although that's sort of early days. Anyway, so I'm not really worried about those scenarios yet,
Yeah.
but we should have this interview in 5 years, right?
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
try to extrapolate another 5.
I mean, I remember recently reading about Steve Wozniak. Originally he was concerned, like Elon Musk and Bill Gates, about unleashing the devil or the beast. Opening Pandora's box with this AI. But then Steve Wozniak said, "Well, look, AI isn't as smart as a 5-year-old kid, or at least not yet. So a lot of these fears are overblown." But then of course we have, as we saw in Avengers: Age of Ultron, an AI trying to become a human, like in robot form. And I remember the old Doc Smith novels from my youth, where they had this. AI that was part of the spaceship, and eventually this AI was a female AI, and she took some elements of DNA from all of the different crew members and was able to fashion her own body. And I'm sure we'll have, whether it's in decades or centuries, and hopefully we don't blow ourselves up in some sort of nuclear or environmental catastrophe before then. But computers wanting to become human. In fact, Asimov did that with Bicentennial Man. So I mean, all of these concepts have been well thought of in sci-fi, and it's again, I'm childlike in my wonder and fascination that we live in a world where it's finally sort of happening, even if in the black and white era of technology.
Oh, well, absolutely. But also, I think when we were reading sci-fi as kids, it's a great eye-opener to possibilities, right? I think, personally, I'm actually more worried that if we get AI, that the AI will not care about us one whit. Right?
Well, that's
not
the Skynet
be
sort of
human,
thing.
but think like, it's like, because if it is as intelligent as we are, at some point, it will be 1,000 times more intelligent. And that's like, we don't know what that would feel like. So it may recognize us as like, okay, well, this is like at least there is some cognitive critical mass, maybe. So we're in a class, or maybe it will just think, oh, these entities are insects.
I've heard of it described that AI will think of us as like pets.
Yeah, maybe, and hopefully pets they like.
Yeah,
but honestly, that's not really what AI is about right now, right? So I think
that's way in the distance.
To your earlier questions about removing management layers, I think we're moving up those layers. So I think AI is now augmenting humans that really normally talk to customers or design things that talk to customers, like marketing campaigns. I think AI is going to take over much of that, and allowing the humans to make more strategic discussions. I think then the AI will get to that level and say, okay, well, I've worked out in the background. I've looked at all of this data. These are some scenarios where I think these are the cost and benefit, and humans are probably still accountable. And then we'll see where it goes. Because at some point, people will have to make, the trade-off between a lot of money and customer satisfaction on the one hand, or running their business in more traditional ways and become dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean, as with all technology, it's supposed to free humans up to do higher level things. Ludd might have not liked those looms that would get rid of humans creating materials, but we don't.
Yes.
Farmers must be very happy to have all those incredible devices, and we don't need to have so many. Taxi drivers or whatever, if we have automated cars and those people. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but humanity will figure it out. We always have before, and we always will in the future.
Yes. Well, but that is true. But what will be a rude wake-up call is the moment that there's an announcement that the Pulitzer Prize winner that you heard last year was actually some AI writing a book that brought everybody to tears, and it was so brilliant, and it was actually written by a computer.
Yeah.
And then I think, because what I do think, I hear all of these things. It's the new steam engine, it's the new train, it's whatever it is. But this is competing with, I think, what makes us completely unique, right? So this is at least looking like it's competing with our thoughts and our brain and our judgment, which I think is a little bit of a different game. So if computers start to be creative and writing books better than we do and painting better than we do, it will be interesting what that does to our ego. But I think that's a long time away, and that could be 10 years.
Well,
Who knows?
we've all seen, robots
Yeah,
playing musical
yeah,
instruments, and they have incredible technical proficiency, but none of the warmth and emotional kind of depth that a human brings. But I mean, they can program computers to fake that.
yeah. Well, but I'm not sure about that. I did a keynote and I
Yeah,
walked on the stage with classical music,
yeah,
and nobody guessed that that classical music had been composed by AI.
yeah. Well, there you go.
I
There you
think it
go.
had all the warmth that,
Well, they've done it already. That's what it comes down to.
yeah,
The thing you saw 10 years ago with some robot playing a violin or a clarinet and doing it, or a piano with technical proficiency and not warmth, well, like what you just said, it's already happened. They've already managed to.
yeah,
I mean, that passes the the test as such for music.
yeah, yeah,
So, look, my second last question, and I've sort of
yeah.
asked many more than that in the interim, and I thank you for indulging me. But, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
Yeah, well, that has nothing to do with AI, but one of
Good.
my first managers, yeah, who I don't think was a robot. No, so I think that
Yeah.
was really human to human advice. And he said, "Listen, I know," and this was like very early in my career, so I was like, excited but
Mm,
also nervous about getting like a very serious job. And he said, "Listen, we didn't hire you to change, right? We hire you for what you are,
mm,
right? So don't change. Don't feel like you need to do all sorts of things that are expected. Just stay who you are, because that's actually what we hired you for, and that got
mm.
you sort of noticed." Which I think was great advice. So I've always tried to remember that and live by that in my career.
Sure. I mean, within that though, obviously there's growth and change just from
Oh, of
life.
course,
But
and
yes,
yeah,
that's right. Don't try to be something you're not. Be who you are, and obviously that's
yeah.
served you well. So that's great advice. And so, what's your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, to your current and future customers and partners, and to our future AI overlords?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, resistance is futile. No, no, no. My thing is like, these are great conversations, and honestly, we should do this, this kind of interview every year or every
Sure,
couple of
absolutely.
years
Well,
and
let's do
see
it. Yeah.
where we're going. But currently, I would really encourage everybody to sort of, separate the hype from actual business benefits,
Mm,
right? Because
mm,
AI is making things incredibly better for not just for companies, but also for consumers when it's used responsibly. It has incredible promise, and that's where I would focus on first, and not worry so much about the overlords. And but if they come, then let's hope they like us.
sure. And look, just on that, I mean, what's the biggest change in AI that you would have seen over the past couple of years in a
Yeah,
real world
well,
sense?
honestly, this is like, because I have seen that there's obviously a lot of these very, very cool use cases, and beating someone at Go. I don't want to. That was a
Mm,
big thing,
mm,
right? There's a lot of smaller things
mm.
that maybe look really, really cool, but beating someone at Go, I think, is a real breakthrough.
And
But I
and
think
and
what I'm actually more impressed with,
mm,
Alex, is the scale at which this is used, right?
yeah.
The companies we work with are using this to help drive, augmenting human judgment, but help drive like billions, tens of
Mm,
billions of decisions, right, every year
mm,
or every month.
mm,
And that's an incredible scale. So I think if I go back to the start of my career, where we had these expert systems and they were thinking for minutes, and then they came out with something, well, not quite trivial, but sort of trivial,
mhm,
right? And now, where we're making billions of decisions at the speed of light in
mm.
all of these different channels that consumers interact with large companies, that is just amazing. And I really try to stand back and see this is just unimaginable, compared to even
Where you were, yeah.
5 or 10 years ago.
Well, Dr. Rob Walker, AI expert and Vice President of Decision Management and Analytics for Pegasystems, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I hope to do this again. And next time you're in Australia, catch up with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.